Okay, my family keeps interrupting me, and I keep trying to record this and to help you guys study, and I'm just wanting to go over the finer points of chapter 4. That's all I want to do. And they keep coming out and looking at me. Whenever they look at me, I go, leave me alone, I'm trying to record this. Okay, finer points from chapter 4. And the reason why I'm doing this is because by the time we get to chapter 5, your brain is about to explode. All right? You've already tried to absorb chapter 4. Now you're trying to absorb chapter 5, plus all the other courses that you must be responsible for. So here I am in my PJs, and I really want you guys to be successful. So I'm going to give you, I don't know, a 15-minute rundown, 10 if I can manage it.
APUSH virus database has been updated.
So my computer's protected. I just want you to know that. She does too. Okay, so moving on. First things first, we want to talk about Georgia. And I want you to identify Georgia as a buffer colony between the British colonies and the Spanish colonies. Georgia was a British colony, but it served as a buffer zone between the Spanish living and occupying Florida and the British colonies that were already established up north, okay, or north of Georgia anyway. It was established as a penal colony by a man by the name of Oglethorpe. And the date to remember is 1752. And when I say penal colony, I'm talking about criminals. And usually these criminals were debtors, people that couldn't pay their debts back in England. And so they were given a choice. Would you like to go to this howling wilderness, or would you like to go to debtor's prison? And so many of them did choose to go to debtor's prison. No. Most of them actually chose to go to Georgia, but you have to remember that this was a kind of a hard choice because it is a howling wilderness, okay? All right. Slaves communicated by creating new dialects. We talked about how slaves were coming from numerous different tribes and things like that. And so a lot of them are coming and they're not able to communicate. They're not all speaking the same language. They don't have all the same traditions and cultures. However, as slaves, they do identify with each other. And so in order to communicate, they start blending their languages and they're creating new, unique dialects. Spanish enslavement. This is a result of the Indian population being on decline. Okay? So with the Indian population on decline, Spanish begin enslaving African Americans. And that's really the main reason, because they don't want to go to the trouble of shipping and paying for the shipping of... I have to adjust this because the glare is going to bother me. Okay. They don't want to go to the trouble of paying all this money to have them have Africans shipped to them, so they would prefer Indian labor. However, the decline in the Indian population, which we talked about, went from 10 million to 1 million on the North American continent. That's something we have to think about. So for that reason, the Spanish began participating in the slave trade. Okay, so slaves in the Caribbean were largely engaged in what type of agriculture? You can't answer me. Okay. Sugar. Sugar. Okay? They were involved in sugar agriculture and sugar production. And it's important that we remember that cotton really did come later. Okay? We'll talk about cotton in the future, but it really isn't in the 1700s that we see cotton as a main agricultural product that is being produced. Okay? So, slaves in the Caribbean are engaged in sugar production. Slaves came from a great variety of backgrounds. We tie that back in with the language, okay? They're not all from the same culture. They're from different backgrounds that have a variety of practices, cultural practices. So some might have really sophisticated trade practices, while others might be more primitive. Okay? I'm not going to get into all the different types of African cultures. However, it is good to know, and for purpose of testing and the purpose of understanding what the slave culture was like in Africa, in America, based on where the Africans were coming from. Most slaves went to the Caribbean. All right, most slaves went to the Caribbean. I think that's important to know. A lot of us just assume that they're shipped over here, but they're not. A lot of them end up in the Caribbean, and then they eventually make their way here, or they stay in the Caribbean, but that is the typical destination of most Africans who are being enslaved. And then who's enslaving them? Who's actually going out and capturing and enslaving the African population? It's Europeans, yes, but it's also their fellow Africans. There's Africans who are taking advantage of the opportunity to make money from Europeans. So they're actually going out and they're depleting their own population. So we have African people enslaving Africans, and I think it's a really sad thing to think about, but it was going on, okay? And it was predominantly Africans that were enslaving their fellow Africans, okay? The Middle Passage, we've talked about this a lot, and I'm really hoping that you did watch Amistad, because I think it was a really good movie. Some of you may not like it, but it's good, and you can find it through Netflix if you wanted to watch it. I don't know if you have Netflix that you can automatically download things, but you might be able to get Amistad that way. Great movie, depicts the Middle Passage in a way that's quite shocking. So the Middle Passage was long, it was unsanitary, resulted in a lot of sickness, malnutrition, and shock. What did the slave trade do to Africa? It weakened it. We're depleting the population of Africa by taking 12 million people. 10 to 12 million Africans are being sold into slavery from Africa. That's a lot of people, and we're depleting the population, and it's weakening the African continent, okay? In the South, the large plantations are areas where there are larger groups of Africans, and they're able to start creating their own African American culture, their own distinct culture that incorporates some of their traditions from Africa, but it also incorporates a more colonial type of European types of cultures, as well as very distinctly African American culture. And when I say distinctly African American, I mean it's a blending of culture, but it also consists of that slavery component. Slavery is their everyday world. So obviously that's going to be a big component in how they structure their belief systems and the way they interact with each other. Their oral traditions are going to change, and slavery is going to make its way into that. Okay. We also have the Stono Rebellion in 1739, and this is the largest rebellion by African Americans, and they do manage to escape the plantation. They recruit other African Americans from other plantations. They kill a lot of settlers, and they're on their way to Florida when they are captured. Okay? That happens in 1739, and it's called the Stono Rebellion. 10 to 12 million slaves were taken to America, or the Americas, more precisely, because, like I said earlier, we have slaves coming into the British colonies along the Atlantic seaboard of North America, but we also have a great deal of them. Most of them, in fact, are going into the Caribbean. And then the other thing I wanted to hit on real quick is that slavery is hereditary, okay? And it's along the matrilineal line. So if your mom was a slave, you were a slave. Doesn't matter who your dad was, okay? So those are the fine points of Chapter 4 that I wanted to cover again, and I hope that that helps you. And I encourage you to go back and reread Chapter 4, review your own notes. Mr. O'Rednick had a lot of important things that he said, and honestly, it's important that we have kept as much of Chapter 4 in our brain as Chapter 5. In order to be successful on a Unix exam, you have to be able to understand both chapters and hold on to that information. So this is just a quick review of some of those major points that were covered in Chapter 4. And I don't know what's going to be on your test, so I don't know if all of this is going to be useful or not. I did not make your test. Mr. O'Rednick did. I will make your future tests, and in the future, because I'm making your tests, I'm not going to do this sort of thing. I might do a review, but it's going to be much more broad. And the reason being is because I really want you guys to learn how to study on your own. Okay? So 12 minutes, we covered Chapter 4. Chapter 5, hopefully we'll have a good chance to review in class. And if we didn't, then I encourage you to review it on your own. Okay? That's it. See you in class.